All right, guys, I'm back to round out the series that I did with Jim McConnell from Light Elegance Nail Products. Jim and I have been breaking down some really big questions in the gel nail industry over the last several weeks. And today we're going to finish with a really important topic that affects so many nail technicians and so many nail clients. And that is your gel cured? We're going to be talking about the importance of gel being fully cured to a safe level and how you can actually test to make sure that your gel is properly cured. With so much talk about allergies in our industry and people getting allergic to monomers and acrylates and all kinds of things that are inside of nail products, I really wanted to finish this series with something that I think is going to empower all of you to better understand gel products, how they can be used safely, and how to avoid some of those typical pitfalls that happen when our lamps are not fully curing our product. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this series that I did with Jim. I've really enjoyed it. Jim and I really love giving back to this industry, and I hope you get a lot out of this last video.
Hi, this is Jim McConnell coming to you from Light Elegance headquarters in Redmond, Oregon, with my dear friend Liz Morris from the Nail Hub.
Hey guys.
And today we are talking about, is it cured?
Yeah.
Is it cured?
Is it cured?
Is it cured?
That is a big conversation point with gels, is how do we know if our gels are cured?
And what can you do to know if it's cured or not cured?
Yep. So I'm really excited to be back with you, Jim. We've done an amazing collaboration. I mean, we've done several videos over the years together, and I always really enjoy being here at HQ and just doing this data download with you. And, you know, we talked about this topic of gel curing and conversion rates and how do we know if our gels are cured, because obviously when it comes to safety in the workplace and safety for our clientele, if gels aren't fully cured, we can find ourselves with some issues, whether it be service breakdown or some stuff that maybe we can't even see.
Or adhesion.
Or adhesion issues, yeah. The peeling, the bubbling.
Peeling, breaking,
Absolutely.
lifting from the free edge.
Yeah, yeah.
And in worst case scenarios, allergies.
Right. And for those of you that did not watch our video yet about HEMA and allergies, skin allergies caused, potentially by nail products, I really recommend you guys go back and watch that video. We did a major deep dive on the conversation of ingredients in our gels and how, even just with ingredient choice in our formulas, we can, again, mitigate a lot of these risks that we're talking about today. But we've also just got some really good information for you about, is our gel cured and how do we make sure that it is? And, what do we need to look for? Is it dangerous? What levels are dangerous? What should we be looking for as nail technicians and nail professionals?
Exactly. So what we're going to look at initially, some very simple equipment. We have a simple scale that we purchased from Amazon, 15, 20 bucks. Then whatever curing light you have, whether it's a mini, if it's a little sun mouse light, if it's an LED dot, an OPI light, a C&D light.
Yeah.
There's a plethora out there, as you all know. Yeah. So do you save the money and buy something that can be purchased for near nothing on Alibaba Express or AliExpress? Or do you spend a little bit more money on something economical but very efficient? Or do you spend a lot more money on a professional grade type of a curing light?
Absolutely.
What are the effects of those curing lights on the finished polymer when you cure it and cut it up and then soak it in something and see what comes out? How can you evaluate those things? All of these things are important.
Yeah. So at a high level, what Jim was telling me about this process is we can identify in a way whether or not our gels are fully cured all the way through. Even though visually they may appear to be cured, sometimes there actually is a good amount of the product that hasn't fully converted, it hasn't fully polymerized. So this test is a way for you to actually be able to see at home or in your nail salon whether or not your lamp and your gels are actually able to create that polymerization that we're looking for at the levels that are safe for wear. Yeah. So I think this is a really cool experiment, and essentially what we're going to be doing is looking at how much of the gel mass is lost through a process to see if, before and after, is there a change and how much of that might be leaching out as we wear our gels. And also, one thing I wanted to bring up that you brought up to me as we were talking about ingredients, we're talking about things like hemomonomer, right? And you were also talking about HPMA as well.
Hydroxypropyl methacrylate.
Yep. And again, we talked about hemomonomer as far as, the unbound hema versus the bound hema that you'll find in gel ingredients. One of the really interesting things that you told me about was water solubility.
Right.
So what would someone see, when it comes to a leaching effect with under-cured product as they wear it for the next 2 to 4 weeks?
So if your product contains HEMA or HPMA at mostly very high concentrations, then what can happen is if it's not cured very well, so maybe you use the wrong light to cure it, maybe one that's not recommended, or the company doesn't even recommend a light. Just say use whatever light you want out there. With those cases, you can take a piece of the plastic that's formed from the curing process, soak it in isopropanol or acetone, but in most cases now, because it's soak off and swell, we're going with isopropanol, and remove any uncured monomer from that system. If it's bound HEMA, that's going to be part of an oligomer. Most of that really doesn't leach out. But the HEMA monomer or the HPMA monomer at high concentrations in the wrong curing lamp can cause it to be not bound, not reacted, and as a result, what we'll wind up doing is we will extract some of that uncured HEMA or uncured HPMA from the cured polymer.
Yeah.
And in those cases, it's an indicator that you're using the wrong light. So it is not cured in that case, to answer that question.
Right. Even though it feels like it's cured, it looks like it's cured, some of that leaching effect can be happening. And, as someone who's wearing this under-cured product on our nails, I mean, that leaching will, come into contact with our skin, potentially cause allergies down the road, depending on how our body responds to that ingredient that's being, spread all over our skin and into our bloodstream. And that's where we wind up with the situation where we've got clients that now have developed allergies to nail ingredients, and it's very difficult to come back from that, if at all. So.
Exactly. And here's one thing to keep in mind, too. With the HEMA or the HPMA, those are water soluble, and if it is undercured, what happens when you wash your hands in hot water? So if you're washing your hands in hot water, will it leach out? The answer to that question is most likely yes, because we've noticed that with some formulations with really high concentrations of some of these monomers that are water soluble, if it's not cured properly, will it lead to allergies? And in those cases, I think that it does. It's a theory. And I think that there's some evidence that would support that. However, more testing would have to be done.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing to consider is that if that's the case, can it be remedied or rectified by using a much better light?
Right.
Without spending an arm and a leg and maybe even part of a torso to get a proper light to cure it.
Yeah.
Then making sure that you have a way to analyze that.
Yeah, and I feel like this is one of the frustrating parts that people may not understand about when a manufacturer or someone recommends that you have the lamp that goes with your system. One of the main reasons for that is that it's already been assessed whether or not the gel is properly curing in that lamp. When you start to create variables by adding in different equipment with a different gel system, now you kind of don't really know whether or not things are coming out the way they're supposed to. And this is, part of a way that you could identify, given what you've got already, if things are actually curing properly or not at a high level.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So why don't we get into how someone would be able to orchestrate this experiment themselves, and you can explain a little bit about the leaching process and how that kind of affects this and what nail techs could do to test their products.
By all means. So what we would do is we would go ahead and take a gel that's in question, put it onto a form, make it uniform in thickness or as uniform as you can make it.
Okay.
As long as it's close enough, we're good to go. Fairly thin, like you would apply to a fingernail.
Okay.
And then you go ahead and cure it. Either you can cure it in a dot mini, you can cure it in this little mouse light, and then you would go ahead and cure it. When you're done, cleanse the sticky layer off both sides, trim it down to a manageable size so that it's roughly large enough and small enough to fit into a medicine cup. And then when you take that piece, you'll weigh it. So that's where you need the scale. And what we're going to do is turn the scale on. And once the scale's on, you weigh your piece. You write down that weight. That's your initial weight. But in the science world, we just put WT sub I. So that's how we designate initial weight. And then we'll go ahead put isopropanol or a different solvent. Now, in the past, because of hard gels, we'll do the same testing with acid,
Okay.
not isopropanol.
Right.
With soak-off gels, you want something that's going to be more compatible with the system that you're trying to analyze.
Yep.
So you put isopropanol into the cup, you put your little piece in there, and then you cover it, you let it sit for about an hour. After an hour, you pull it out and let it dry. Give it about 24 hours to dry. And then you go ahead and weigh it again.
Yeah.
And you can measure the weight initial and the weight final. And then that difference winds up being the weight loss based on the extraction or the leaching of the uncured resins from that system.
Yeah.
When you have that evaporation that's taken place, you'll wind up with a cup where the solvent once was. The solvent is no longer there. Then sometimes you'll see a film in the bottom of that cup.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were able to weigh the cup before and after the test, you would have a weight of that film. And that weight of the film would equal the amount of weight loss from your sample of plastic.
Yeah. So that fact that that stuff is leaching out into the isopropyl alcohol, and actually we also did this with some of the LE cleanser as well because it's high
Mostly
amount of
IPA.
IPA. Then you can basically do that as well, and it's really cool to know that the amount that's being extracted from that gel is that uncured portion. Now, one of the things that I wanted to bring up that was a little bit of a misconception, and we were talking about this here before we started filming, was there isn't going to be a pocket per se or some type of visual loss that you're going to be able to see. And we're not talking about something where it's cured, and then you've got this little pocket of uncured gel that's going to seep out, and then you're going to break it open, and there's going to be a hollow area. It's actually a full mass loss, so the entire piece will actually shrink
In dimension
as well as mass or weight, which I thought was really important to just make that distinction so that you guys don't try cracking it open and being like, there's no hole in the middle, it's totally fine. But this is a really cool experiment for you guys to be able to try to see if you're seeing that huge weight loss before and after, and it'll give you a good high-level indicator of if your gels are curing to that level.
And this is a test that would be used to evaluate whether the curing system that you are using for the gel system is actually going to emit or not create allergies or create allergy issues. Right?
Yep. And it's I wanted to also say this too, because when I asked Jim about this, I like to have high level, is it cured or is it not cured type of, base points for nail technicians, because obviously there's a whole litany of range between how much is it cured, how little is it cured, and we're going to get into that in a second as far as, conversion rates and all of that. But I thought it was really good to start with this so that at least you can have that, is it cured to a point that we're not having leaching out onto the skin, or is it not cured enough that we actually are having leaching out onto the skin? So this is a great kind of 30,000 foot view to see, is it cured or is it not? Yeah.
Another way to evaluate that with this as being understood is to create a little piece of plastic using the form and curing techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So you could cure it in a little light, you can cure it in a different little light, you can cure it in a professional light like our LED dot. If you evaluate the maximum cure thickness of each one of those, then what you can do is see how thick that overall cure thickness is.
Mm-hmm.
And that overall cure thickness might be quite a bit thinner with some lights than with other lights.
Okay.
And so that's a different way to evaluate it. You'll also notice that when you do that test, you can measure that cure thickness. If you flip that sample upside down, so the belly of it that was up against the form is now face up against the light. If that's the case, will it become harder or more rigid after you cure it one more time?
Okay.
And what happens is, at the top surface of that gel sample, closest to the lights, it will cure as much as it's going to cure, whatever percentage that happens to be.
Right.
As you flip it over onto its back, so its belly is now exposed, and you've removed the uncured material, you'll cure it again. Now that's going to cure as much as it's going to cure upside down. And then if it's more rigid, you know that it was on too thick and it could lead to other issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you want to do that test so that it's about as thick as you're going to put it on someone's fingernail.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's another way that we can, define whether or not something is cured? Do you have another test that you wanted to show us?
We do. This is a great little one.
Awesome.
I love my little thermometers. So this one we have seen before. You remember this one?
I do remember that.
Okay, so
Very
on this
cool.
one here, we have two little antennae, little thermocouples. One of them goes inside the light, and one of them goes inside the gel. What we can use this one for, not only can we measure how much exothermic reaction it has per our videos that we've done earlier, but we can also use this to evaluate, is it cured or is it not cured? This is a great way to go. Because if you cure a gel, say in this little sun lamp, and you cure it for 30 seconds, and maybe that's what the manufacturer recommends to cure the gel for, and then afterwards you let everything cool back down, so it's all zeros, all on the thermocouple. And then you run it again. If you get another heat spike, that temperature of the curing of the gel comes back up again, it wasn't cured.
Right.
So you just leave the one thermocouple into the gel, and then you cure it a second time and see if it gets any hot.
Right.
If it gets hot again, it wasn't cured completely.
Right.
You can do it a third time and a fourth time and a fifth time until you see no more temperature changes in that gel. Then you take that same piece of gel and you put it into maybe something like the Dot Mini. So in the Mini Dot, maybe you try it one more time and it gets hot again. This light is completely insufficient.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've seen that in some of our testing where we maybe cure it 5 or 6 times in one light,
Put it
and
into
put it in a
visual.
different light, and you get more heat.
Wow, that's crazy.
So this one here will have cured it as far as it can cure it.
Yeah.
But then you put it in a stronger light, and all of a sudden you get more heat. It's like, okay, that light is really insufficient.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, when we're talking about products that require ultraviolet light exposure in order to be able to do their thing, in order to be able to polymerize and form the product on the nails that we're looking for, you can understand how important your piece of equipment, as far as your lamp is concerned, is in your service. I mean, if you're toying around with your lamp and you're not actually paying attention to these types of things, you could be investing thousands of dollars into products that ultimately, because of your lack of a proper equipment, isn't doing what you think it's going to do.
fail.
Yeah.
The product itself may be the best product on the market, but if you're carrying the wrong light, you're going to fail.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest troubleshooting questions I get asked is, I've been curing this, I don't understand why it's still sticky or why it's not working properly. And really it comes down to, they've got a great system, but they have a terrible lamp. And a lot of people don't realize that this is probably one of the biggest investments and most serious investments you're gonna have as a gel nail technician.
And making sure that whatever light you're using is maintained appropriately. So make sure that your LED emitters are clean, making sure the reflective surface on the inside is free of gel as much as possible, and to make sure that the emitters themselves are still emitting the proper level of light or energy. So in this case, maybe the light is 3 or 4 years old and it's time to replace it, but you don't want to spend the extra $150, $200.
Right.
So if that's the case, you're better off spending the extra money because you could create problems down the road.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
to answer your other question, are there other ways to test for completeness of cure? Yes, we can do instrument tensile elongation testing. That's one.
Which is where you stretch the gel cured gel.
Stretch it, and if it's under-cured, it will stretch further and it'll break easier, or it'll just break really, really easy and initially, because it has no strength, because it's not polymerized properly. The other way is to do hardness testing, so either a short hardness tester, which is a sharp needle that goes into a machine that has a spring attached to it and a gauge readout. So pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And then the third one is pencil hardness testing, where you literally try and scratch the surface with pencil graphite at various hardnesses and see at which hardness it actually mars the surface in a position that can't be repaired.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
So pretty simple ways to go.
Yeah. But as far as being able to do this, in any type of salon setting, I really think that the scale is probably the best option for most people that don't have a lot of equipment available to them. I mean, you're talking about what, a $15 scale,
Yep.
and some isopropyl alcohol, and you're away and running and able to figure out if your gel is cured at a sufficient level.
Yeah. And then the digital micrometer.
And digital
So you
micrometer
can
too.
measure the actual cure thickness.
Right. And so that would be like a caliper per se, but a very sensitive one.
Very sensitive. I like the digital ones because they're easy to read.
Okay.
Yeah, the vernier ones that have the little screw dial on them, a little harder to read.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so if we want to get a little bit more nitty gritty, obviously, some people might be watching this and going, okay, yeah, yes or no, is it cured? But what's the danger zone? I mean, are we really avoiding all of the risk? What levels should gel be cured to? And what are you seeing out there on the marketplace as someone who tests a lot of these things in your lab?
So what we test is the level of cure, And the best way for us to do that is usually the tensile hardness testing.
Okay.
So we'll actually do a dog bone and we'll pull on it, use 10 samples, average out the highs, the lows, and get it all so it's one even number.
Right.
That's the best way to go. It will polymerize and it will feel fairly hard at about 50% cure.
Okay.
But as you finish curing it and you get it closer to 90%, that's about as good as you can really do. 90, 95. Tough. It's really tough to get to 100% cure.
Right. And as far as uncured product leaching, the risk with that, like we said, coming out and being your skin being exposed to that, I mean, what would you say is a percentage that professional products should be cured to?
I think that the more cured you can get, the better.
Okay.
That's just bottom line. Some systems are going to leach more than other systems because if they have higher percentages of like monomers in there, then that's going to be the big issue.
Okay.
And it's tough to put a thumb on anyone that's really going to be the determining factor.
Okay.
But you just want to avoid having ones that have high percentages of water-soluble monomers, like HEMA and HPMA, that will leach out because they're undercured. So even the ones that have the high percentages are fine as long as you cure them completely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So making sure that you just follow through, make sure it's all cured. Better to cure, overcure in this case, making sure that it is cured as most completely as possible, rather than having it remain undercured and curing too quickly.
Yeah.
Or buying the wrong light.
Yeah. And that's also why if you're really the type of person that just wants to keep it simple, then stick with the system that matches your lamp. But if you are one of those adventurous people that likes to throw in extra variables, or like, average nail technicians, we like to own more than one brand. I'm sure there are a lot of you that, are saying, hey, I don't want to be limited to just one lamp and one system. I like to buy lots of different things from different places. At least you can, at a high level, test this to see, is your lamp compatible with what you just purchased and is it curing to a sufficient level? All right, this is great info, Jim. I mean, honestly, I think this is a really cool experiment for everyone to try. And we really encourage you to try this, provide feedback to us about how it went for you, what your results were like. And I think this is a really good test for everyone to really experiment with and see what happens with your products that you have in your salon. All right, well, thanks for tuning in, guys. And we've got more amazing collab videos to come. Really encourage those of you who already follow my Nail Hub channel to follow Jim's Chemist Corner at Light Elegance HQ and at Chemist Corner. I think the type of content you're putting out is just absolutely, you can't put a price point on it. I feel like every time I'm with you, it's a whole college course on nail product chemistry. It's really fun to actually be able to do this in person. And I think those of you who are interested in being more knowledgeable professionals should take full advantage of everything Jim's putting out there on YouTube and across the internet. It's very, very valuable stuff.
Thanks, Liz. And I do have to say, shout out to you and all the content you generate. At the Nail Hub is a plethora of information, and it is all valuable, everyday information that you can use in the salon.
Absolutely. We're out here demystifying all the complicated stuff.
Follow Liz at the Nail Hub.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in, and you'll see us again on our next collab.
Thank you.
Bye.